Before we get started, let's have a little listen to Boris's worst moment, I think. Keir Starmer kicking him all over the House of Commons yesterday with a series of ruthless jokes.
Well, I know it's not going well, Prime Minister, but look on the bright side. At least the staff at Number 10 know how to pack a suitcase. Mr. Speaker, I see the very noise. I'm sure the Chief Whip has told them to bring their own booze. As he waded through the empty bottles and platters of sandwiches, he didn't realise it was a party. Does the Prime Minister realise how ridiculous that sounds?
You see, Dominic, if you are able to make Keir Starmer actually seem funny, you must be in a world of trouble. I mean, the trouble with Boris Johnson, I mean, in my heart of hearts, I sort of don't want him to go because I do think he started off as a promising Prime Minister and somehow he's allowed himself to be rather ludicrously derailed by Partygate. But he's committed the cardinal political sin, hasn't he? He's just given the opposition, his opponents, so much ammunition to fire him down with, as we heard just now with Keir Starmer. I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? He's done too many wrong things.
Yeah, that is the problem, because Keir Starmer is renowned for really being quite boring, actually. So for him to be able to rattle off jokes and sort of get the house going, if anything, it was really surprising. But then, you know, not to defend Boris just for the sake of it, but at the same time, Boris Johnson was not acting like a prime minister that sensed his imminent demise. There was equally a very confident performance from himself. And I think within his mind, that was his last-ditch attempt to prove that he's still worth being prime minister, that, you know, he has the sort of force to rally his MPs behind him and continue to embarrass the opposition. And I think what was really interesting about PMQs on Wednesday was that it was sort of repetitive. You had the usual, you know, calling for his resignation, lambasting him over rule breaking, which is fair enough, but the Prime Minister had a set response. It was be patient, wait for the inquiry. So from my personal perspective, I don't really think that those attacks landed as well as they could from the opposition.
And then, of course, there was, I want to talk about this in a minute, there was the turncoat Christian Wakeford who crossed the House and went from the Tories to the Labour Party. I think there are issues that we have to discuss about that, about the technicalities of that, which I think are an appalling affront to democracy. But we'll talk about that. Yeah. That was one body blow to Boris yesterday, and the other was this.
But I expect my leaders to shoulder the responsibility for the actions they take. Yesterday, he did the opposite of that. So I'll remind him of a quotation altogether too familiar to him of Leo Amery to Neville Chamberlain. You have sat there too long for all the good you have done. In the name of God, go.
Now, the thing is, by counterintuitively, Dominique, Wakeford's action, which is taken very seriously in the House of Commons. I mean, my kind of view is, who the hell's Gavin Wakeford? Who cares? Nothing to see here, move along. But I suppose symbolically, it was quite a big event. And then you had David Davis there, the Tory grandee, former cabinet minister, very big name, standing up and saying, in the name of God, go. So it looked like that was an extraordinary couple of events, stunning moments yesterday, but they were so damaging, they were so vicious that people started to feel sorry for Boris. And counterintuitively, they had the opposite effect of derailing him or defenestrating him. They suddenly made his position look a lot stronger. It's strange.
Exactly. And that's what's really curious about this, because even in terms of Theresa May during PMQs towards the end of her premiership, she would have MPs such as, you know, Jacob Rees-Mogg openly challenging her in a policy on Brexit during PMQs. And that sort of signalled the end of the road for her. So for such a respected MP, such as David Davis MP, to stand up and say, you need to go, that would have been a considerable blow to the Prime Minister. And even on his face, you could see that he was quite annoyed by it, because it is embarrassing. But then on the other hand, that's matched with, you know, Christian Wakeford joining over to the Labour side, but many people saying, you know, Bury South voted for a Conservative MP. Surely there should be an immediate by-election. So that actually motivated people to rally behind the PM. And the reason why I think David Davis's comments didn't land as much as they could have is specifically because of that Labour defection, and also because a lot of people are wondering what the alternative is. I've spoken to so many people about the possibility of Boris's resignation, even my mum, and she said to me, but who else is there? What is the alternative? So whilst in any other scenario I would have supported David Davis's comments 100%, who is the real alternative? I don't think there is one.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that the Tories can shore Boris up, but I'm not sure whether the electorate will go with them. I absolutely agree with you. I mean, who is the alternative? I mean, Rishi Sunak seems the obvious one, but he's only 41, and even he has indicated he might not be ready. Liz Truss, I suppose, is a possibility, but no one sort of obviously springs to mind. So Boris might be their best bet, but they're going to have to shore him up in terms of Partygate. And I also think he's got lots of trouble coming down the tracks about lockdowns. I mean, it now seems clear that all the lockdowns that he plunged us into weren't necessary and didn't work. But that's a sort of another issue. But what do you make today, Dominic, of this extraordinary moment where it was revealed or claimed that Boris's whips, the people who go round getting Boris's business done in Parliament, have been going round making threats to rebel MPs, saying that they'll be defunded and they've got no career prospects. And it has been suggested that they call in the police. I mean, this is quite serious as well, isn't it?
That is quite serious, yes, but this may be controversial, but when it comes to the whips, blackmailing and threats is sort of part and parcel of politics. I'm sorry, it might be something that not a lot of people want to accept, but a lot of that goes on behind closed doors to get people to vote the way the government wants them to. That is just an open secret. I
tend to agree with you. It was William Wragg, the chair of the Commons Public Administration Committee, was the guy who stood up today and said anybody who feels they've been intimidated or possibly blackmailed to back the Prime Minister and to stop rebelling should bring in the police, which was quite a significant step. But of course, Boris and the Tory party deny this completely. But it just sort of plays into... This is all about, it's so infuriating because it was a promising premiership, and because of these stupid parties, we've got this terrible mess going on now, from which I think the Prime Minister will struggle to emerge.
I agree with you because, as we both agreed, blackmailing, especially in the case of three-line whips, it sort of is part and parcel of politics to get you to vote with the government. But the fact that that was announced by William Wragg, I think that is indicative of the Prime Minister's authority completely crumbling amongst his MPs. Because we all know it happens, but for one of them to stand up and say, if people are being intimidated, they need to contact the police, there's no real respect for the Prime Minister left. I do think if there were to be a vote of no confidence, my sense is that he would survive, like Theresa May did. But I think upon that actually happening, it would be the beginning of the end for Boris Johnson. And with the way his MPs are behaving, it really is. It's only just a matter of time. And I think what the disappointing thing for me is, as you said, we've realised that lockdowns have been completely unnecessary. Places like France, like Israel, have just exemplified that for us. But it took the Prime Minister for him to be threatened, with his job, for all of the stuff about the parties to come out. It took that for him to actually see sense, get rid of Plan B, get rid of the masks in the classroom, and actually wake up and smell the coffee. And that's the disappointing thing. Yeah,
I mean, he's been forced because of his existential crisis, his terrible predicament. He's been trying to come up with policies that will make him popular again. In other words, he's finally had to become a Conservative MP, or rather Prime Minister, a Tory Prime Minister, as you say. He's having a go at the BBC. He's talking about bringing the Navy in to deal with Channel migrants. And of course, he's abandoned the ridiculous Plan B restrictions that were never necessary in the first place. So if this is the way forward, that's fine by me. But I just wonder, the electorate tend to be notoriously forgetful, so you'd be surprised if Sue Gray exonerates him next week. you probably find in about 2 or 3 months, nobody will remember Partygate. And if he can regain his popularity, then I'd like to see him take the Tories into the next election. But if he can't, and the public will not forgive him, I don't want to see him digging his heels in an act of kind of egotistical arrogance, which will take him into the next election as a liability, and he'll lose to Labour. I just want a Tory leader that won't lose to Keir Starmer at the next election. If it can be Boris, I think that's a very good bet. But I'm just not convinced it can be. Do you think he can actually launch a comeback, a successful comeback from this?
Oh, that's a hard question. I'm in two minds about it because obviously Partygate is very fresh in everyone's minds, but for some reason there is something about Boris Johnson whereby he seems to just get away with murder all of the time. Even me now, and I'll admit I've been Boris Johnson's harshest critic, but I find myself sat here trying to defend him almost because I don't want him to go. I remember I said that, restrictions would be gone on the 26th of January. He did it. I was really, really happy about that. We've ended up one of the freest countries in Europe. My friend who lives in Paris with his parents at the moment, he's like, I can't wait to get back to England because in Paris, you have to wear a mask forcefully 24/7. There's no such thing as exemptions there. So when
also, Dominic, you have to have vaccine passports and mandatory virtually everywhere you go to get into bars, restaurants, everywhere. And it's they've passed a full-time law on that basis. And Macron, just like Boris, doesn't seem to have noticed vaccine passports don't work because I think it was 2 or 3 days ago, France had a record 450,000 new cases. 450,000. Right? So, he's like our lot. They bring in these policies that just don't work. Before we go to break, though, can I ask you about, go back to Christian Wakeford? They need to do something about this. Now, this is a man who was voted in by the constituents of Bury South as a Tory MP on a whim as a self-serving turncoat. A guy who thinks if I'm not careful, I'll lose the next election. I'll lose my job. He switches to Labour, and suddenly the people of Bury South who voted for a Conservative MP have got a Labour MP, and they had no say in the matter. This is ludicrous. It's an affront to democracy. In future, they've got to do this fast. In future, if a sitting MP wants to defect to another party, there has to be a by-election.
Do you know what's funny about this and what's funny about, Mr. Christian Wakeford is that in 2020, he co-sponsored a private members bill that would actually seek to trigger immediate by-elections when an MP defects. So by any means, he should be in full support of a by-election being called in Bury South, but conveniently, he's not. And there's the hypocrisy. And that is the problem, I think, for the Conservatives at the moment, particularly with the Red Wall, because obviously Christian Wakeford is in a Red Wall seat. And if you look at the people that have actually put in letters, votes of no confidence in the Prime Minister, a lot of them have actually come from the Red Wall because they're very insecure about the future of their seats. Was he ever a Conservative in the first place? And that's why it was also good for the Prime Minister, because for you to go to the opposite end of the spectrum, my immediate response was that you're a worm, mate, a really big worm, and there should be a by-election, and his constituents should be able to choose.
I think it has to be mandatory from now on. That means, say I was the Tory candidate for, I don't know, name a safe Tory seat, Guildford or somewhere like that, True Blue constituency. I could be voted in, and then 10 minutes later say, right, change of mind. I now represent the monster raving loony party, and that they can do, and the people can do nothing about it. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, that's not democracy. You were voted in as a Conservative, and those are some very, to be fair, a lot of people can't distinguish between the two nowadays.
No, but it's the technicality of it. The MP should not be able to usurp the decision of the people. That's outrageous, and it has to stop. Hold that thought, Dominic. We're going to go to break, and we'll resume the conversation. Welcome back, Dominic. Let's have a little listen to our friend Christian Wakeford.
This isn't a matter of just deciding this morning, I want to be a Labour MP. This has been many months in the build-up, and whether it goes back to the issues over free school meals, of Dominic Cummings, over universal credit, the cost of living crisis, the Owen Paterson affair, or now Partygate. There's been a lot of build-up to this and a lot of soul-searching that's taken many sleepless nights. But it's ultimately the right decision, and I hope my former colleagues can, certainly if they don't agree, can understand that.
That's a snivelling little turncoat with a 400 majority who feels he might lose his job. Simple as that. Self-serving, trying to save his own backside. That's all this is about. There's no high principles here. Don't make any mistake about that. He was made another speech today. He was so nervous, Dominic. He referred to Keir Starmer as Keith Lama. Which I think is a better name. I like it. Sir Keith Lama.
I like the sound of it.
Because Sir Keith Lama and his deputy Angela Alpaca. What do you reckon? They'd be a good double act, wouldn't they?
Lovely. I love the duo.
But just before, I want to move on in just a second to a couple of other issues. But just to sort of recap and to get our ducks in a row here, the way I see it, and tell me what you think. Boris's future now hinges on Sue Gray's report, which I think comes out which is expected to come out at some point next week. I would have thought Tuesday or Wednesday, something like that. It was supposed to come out this week, but there's a new party revealed every day, so she had to keep just delaying it. But she's looking into, I think now, 10 parties. What's to investigate, by the way? That's ridiculous, bro.
So we know that they happened.
But yeah, I know. And it's also going to rest upon whether or not she's somehow going to accept when Boris saw 40 people drinking gin and tonics and eating crisps in his garden, he thought they were at work. I mean, expecting us to believe that is an insult to our intelligence.
Yeah.
But it may be that the Sue Gray report is the device, the contrived device by which Boris wriggles off the hook. But do you agree with me? That's what his future hinges on, what Sue Gray's report says next week.
That is what it pivots on. But for me, the suspicious thing is that the PM has essentially batted off all attacks, all criticisms, all calls for him to resign, and members of his cabinet have done the same. For example, Rishi Sunak have said, wait for the outcome of the inquiry. I'm not sure a prime minister that sensed, that report would be, the beginning of the end. I'm not sure a prime minister would pivot his premiership on that report unless he was confident that it would be a way for him to wriggle out of trouble. My sense is that the report will scold him and his judgment personally a lot, but I don't think that it will be the catalyst for the end of his premiership. That is just a gut feeling I have. Maybe wrong, but the fact that he's pivoted so much on it, I don't think it's gonna be the end of his premiership.
As I say, there are rumours that it's going to be much harsher than people expect, and certainly harsher than the Prime Minister would like. But I agree with you. I think it's going to give him wriggle room. Of course, if it does conclude and reveal that Boris Johnson knew about this party in May 2020 before it happened, then he's out of there because he told Parliament, he told the House of Commons that he did not. But personally, I agree with you. I don't think it's going to contain that bombshell revelation. So after that, if he does wriggle out by the skin of his teeth, it's a question of how much he can restore his reputation, restore his popularity. And he seems to be heading in the right direction. I like some of his new policies. Perhaps, do you think, though, as part of his drive to become good old Boris again, his backside saving mission, what do they call it? Operation Red Meat, Operation Save Big Dog. Why do they give it two names? It's so confusing. But if it is to succeed, I think he's going to have to really rail back on his green policies, his carbon net zero fantasy, his ludicrous industrial green revolution. Nobody likes those policies except for a few members of the Green Party. Tories don't like it. So what do you think is going to happen to his green obsession?
I don't think it's going anywhere, to be honest. And
I mean, do you think he'll rail back on it, stop mentioning it? I think that's what he'll do.
I think he'll strategically stop mentioning it. I think a lot of people were confused as to why, he was going on about it so much. Obviously, we had COP26, but the thing about the green agenda is it's not just something that is within national borders. It's something that's international. It's something that the European Union is following through with. It's something that the United States is spearheading. We're trying to involve, we'd call them third world countries. We're trying to involve them.
Developing countries. They've got a new name.
Developing countries. I couldn't remember these other words.
That's a woke black mark for you there.
Oops, I didn't know that was banned, but apologies. But yeah, it's a global thing, so it's not just something that is strictly national. And I think that's one of the great reasons why we left the European Union. But obviously, we have a more international integrated approach to it. So there's only so far that he can go, but
the point is, Dominic, though, the trouble with his green dream is that it's already costing us a lot of money, and it's going to cost us many more pounds in the future. And the more it hits people in the pocket, the more people will say, you know what, I don't care about the future of the world. I care about the fact I can't pay the rent. I think it's very significant that ever since he's been in deep trouble about Partygate and Owen Paterson, so going back to late November, not a single mention of his great green policies. Did you notice
they're so unpopular? They're so unpopular, and he knows they're unpopular. But in many ways, he is bound by these international agreements. But the pinch on people's pockets has already started. I mean, let's look at the energy crisis. Part of the reason why we have a pending energy crisis is because of the overzealous move to renewables and for more green ways of producing energy. That's one of the reasons why we're having a crisis right now.
Agreed.
So we'll see how that develops. If the energy crisis becomes so unmanageable that we do have to adopt more traditional means of producing energy for people, that might be the start of a backpedal in terms of the green agenda, but we do have to wait and see, I think.
Yeah, as I said in my monologue at the beginning of the show, one of the other problems he's got really hurtling down the track is the fact that the cost of living is about to rocket. To pay for the furloughs, for the lockdowns, the government has been printing money left, right and centre, quantitative easing, and that results in inflation. And fairly soon, inflation is about to soar to the heights, and it's going to make the cost of living astronomical. It's going to be almost untenable for many people. So he has got a lot of stormy waters to negotiate in the coming months.
Take on that. No one wants to have that responsibility, and that's the thing, because he's got a lot left to do. The pandemic is just the beginning. Now he's got to deal with the after effects, and I don't think anyone else wants that job.
No, exactly. That's another reason why he might stay in the job. No one else wants it. You're right about that. Now, last question, really. The abandoning of the Plan B restrictions, which I'm sure you approved of, I certainly did. Vaccine passports, disgraceful. But of course, one of the things that he abandoned was you no longer have to wear masks. What do you think about the fact that the schools are going to defy this ruling and carry on making kids wear masks, pupils in classrooms? That's outrageous.
Am I surprised? No, because the unions have been clamouring for lockdowns, clamouring for restrictions, clamouring for school closures, but saying in the same breath that we need all these restrictions to keep schools open and to stop disruption to kids. Now they've continued with the mask wearing, despite there being little evidence that this will in any way stop transmission in classrooms. All it will do is disadvantage shy kids, disadvantage children with learning disabilities, or make it harder for pupils and teachers to be able to communicate with one another. It's really got nothing to do with the virus. And I think really what this is it's politically motivated. Because the National Education Union has mentioned, it being a cop-out because of Partygate, for a way for Boris Johnson to save his career, that, the crisis isn't over. In many ways, the crisis is over, I'm afraid. And it's time people started accepting that. And children are least at risk. They don't need to be muzzled. I think it's straight up cruel, and that's why I'm so happy that Us For Them, the organisation that's been against restrictions, is speaking out on this. Seriously.
Totally agree. Leave the kids alone, for God's sake. They've had a terrible time over the past 2 years. And as I said earlier, if Boris, the new hardline Boris, is our protection from these zealots who won't let go of the COVID crisis, who won't let go of masks. The Mayor of London, the Labour Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has ordered that you still have to wear masks on public transport here in the capital for no particular reason. And these teaching unions saying kids still have to wear masks. If Boris is going to protect us from these people and lead us out of the COVID crisis, like frankly he has been now for a month or so, then maybe I do back him staying. But I do think it's going to be a very difficult task for him ahead. Great to talk to you, Dominic, as always. Thank you very much.